some of you have. Well, it's essentially an agreement that the American Institute of Architects actually is more like a challenge that they put out there to all architectural firms to have all new buildings by the year 2030 to be net zero energy, net zero carbon. We're not there yet. We're supposed to be close to 80% right now. In reality, the majority of the players are about 40%, 45%, including Gensler. Gensler, firm that I work for, is a major leader in this effort, and they're being the largest firm in the world, actually a major signatory of that agreement. So essentially, the Architecture 2030 has pushed the market in different ways. Now we have more stringent energy codes. In Texas, we have the second most stringent energy code available, which is almost as good as California. California has their own energy code, but Texas has the second most stringent code, the state of Texas. City of Houston has the same code, which is, if you want to go into specifics, is the 90.1 2013, or the International Energy Conservation Code of 2015. But there are already jurisdictions inside Houston that went one step ahead. Westview comes to mind. Like they are already on the most stringent code, same as the city of San Antonio. So that push actually came from LEED and came from the Architecture 2030 Challenge. We need to get close to having net zero buildings in the future.
So it's your assertion that Houston's current energy codes exceed the current LEED models. And how do they compare?
It depends. Because LEED right now, the version 4 of LEED takes the third most stringent energy code, which is the 2010 one. And if you build to City of Houston standards, then you are building one step ahead of that. So your baselines for LEED actually are better. If you build to code in Houston, you are a little better than the baselines for LEED. So that's a good thing, actually.
Well, we're going to switch. I want to get one more thing though, because I know your specialty, not only in just design, is in performance modeling.
Yes.
So, what is your specialty in performance modeling, telling us about how we need to build?
Well, you need to build sustainably.
It's the short answer, right?
Yeah. No, essentially, what I do, I'm more of a techie guy. More of a computationally oriented guy. So what I do is to model buildings and model designs, early designs, and see how much energy they're going to consume, how the sun will interact with them, how much sun are they letting in or not, how much daylight they're going to have, how much lighting they're going to have, and all this stuff. And that actually allows you to forecast possible scenarios and establish possible optimization routes. What happens if you have a big window oriented to the south? Obviously, you're going to get more energy use than having the same window oriented to the north. So little things like that. We follow a standard, a Gensler, which is it's all put in a document called Impact by Design, and it's available on our website, where we specify, the steps that we do, and performance modeling is actually one of those steps. So essentially, the short answer is I'm the one counting the BTUs and the flip candles and computational models. I'm like a like a hurricane modeler.
You're just a bowl of sunshine then, aren't you? Well, we're going to look at it, we're going to kind of step back a bit, and Bruce is going to help us go there. I know you serve as the chair of the Transportation Group.
Yeah.
For the Mayor's Climate Action Plan, including working on some of this modeling as well. So how are those numbers preparing us for the future, and what are your conclusions?
Well, all but 4%, less than 4% of our emissions, the way the C40 model works, is in purchased energy and in transportation. Okay? And so when you look at our building inventory and how we operate it and how we design it, it's a big user of energy in the city. And so that portfolio is important. It's our portfolio. Everybody in the room, it's our portfolio when we start to look at that. So when you have a building that in the future, the code modeling and the code system is driving us towards zero by 2030.
Yes.
So 2018 was the first time the IBC, the International Building Code, allowed you to go on a performance-based approach versus a prescriptive model. And so it's all about modeling, all right? And so that means innovation. So as soon as you go to a performance-based approach, we have to be innovators. And that's the whole team. That's all of us when we start to look at it that way. So we're going to have a major impact, besides the comfort and the value creation of doing it right. So there's that dimension to it. But also when we think about the employees, and I think about the transportation piece as an architect and urban planner, you know, that if you think about the comfort, like I do not like driving on the highways here. I never was really a NASCAR fan. I'm sorry, you guys, but you know I feel like it's NASCAR all the way here, or Ben-Hur, right? And so Ben-Hur, or NASCAR. And so when you start to look at I'm not comfortable with that, you know, in terms of driving. And so as we extend our commute times and all that, so where we put employment centers, like we had a plan or something. If we had a plan, there's going to be 2 million people coming to Harris County by 2040, 2045. Where are we going to put them, right? And so having an attitude about where we put employment centers and the relationship to our jobs housing relationships ends up being really critical to our reduction in VMT. The building types we build will be more energy efficient.
Density?
Yeah, so you get the density of that, more stacked stuff. And the other piece of this is that our employees will be happier travelers. They won't have to travel as far. We give more mobility choices for that. And then we have to think about our fuel and technology switching. So does anybody here have an EV plug-in at work? That's going to change. Yeah.
Where I live, yes.
Yeah, so that's the thing that's going to change. In 10 years, we all will, and we probably will all have to plug in. The CAFE standards and the Clean Power Plan, those two federal policies, the things that are being tinkered with right now, are 35% of our emissions in Houston. Just those two federal policies. Okay, so the fuel switch is really important. And so the mayor's going to announce something on the 19th you should be paying attention to. We're really standing back now looking at regional infrastructure for that. The private sector, you're going to be players in this. Your employees are going to want it. And when the fleet is going to flip, so we have to flip the fleet 50% by 2030 to plug in. And it just changes our infrastructure and the way we do site planning and how we're going to retrofit our buildings for that. It's just part of our reality. By 2050 in Houston, to hit our numbers, if we can reduce our baseline amount of emissions from transportation, on-road transportation, by 70%, that's a stretch goal. But we have 30% left, right? That's 8.6 miles of West Texas wind, 8.6 square miles. And that's just for our gap, our performance gap. Then you throw in the rest of Texas. So there's a convergence with energy and transportation, right? And so it's a very different way in terms of how we're going to use energy in the future and how these things start to become more connected. You need new management models, for energy. We have to become more local. You have to start looking at where the meters are when we start to design and how we measure stuff. This is all things, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So you have to start thinking about it now. I lived in the People's Republic of Berkeley for 20 years. So next year you have to do net zero in Berkeley. And my students, I'm teaching them, net zero strategies to make them useful at the office, right? They're going to go to work with this guy, and they should be useful.
And I work for this guy.
Yeah. So he wants us all to be useful. Okay. So that's a big part of the future. So as a city. We look at these upper level policies, we have to think about energy differently. We need to start talking about land use planning.
Yeah.
I know we're a little late to the party by about 100 years on this one, right? But if we don't get that piece right, it's going to impact our livability and our sustainability as well, because these things need to intersect at a city scale. So I'm going to lean back.
Yeah.
You're going to have to dark me.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
By a show of hands, let's do the machete constant test on the audience. So the machete constant is there's this was he a mathematician or a physicist?
I believe he's a mathematician.
Yeah. So he said
bowler.
he said that people tend to prefer commutes not longer than 30 minutes. So how many in the room here have a commute longer than 30 minutes? 1, 2, 3.
That's impressive and useful.
Yeah, you guys are lucky, the rest of you. I was expecting a longer one, or a bigger show of hands.
It depends on the day.
Oh, so you're borderline.
So, but also I think what's funny, I think about that question, it's a very valid question. It's one we often ask in urban planning in circles. But the caveat to that I would add in Houston is, how many people have a 30-minute drive or more, but it's only 10 miles, right? So that's the bigger issue, right?
Yeah.
So I would add a caveat. How many of you have a drive that's 30 minutes but it's also it's less than 30 miles, right? That's the question, right? And so many people here might live relatively close, but there's so much traffic they can't get around. And so that's the challenge. But let's talk about, we're going to bring it back to the business side, and then we're going to go big picture with the planning. We've heard a bit from all of us, but the life cycle benefits to developers that come from building performance. A few of you can probably answer that, but there are life cycle benefits to these things. So what are they?
Well, essentially, a building that has enhanced comfort and has wellness. It's a building that people prefer to live in, so it's a building that's not going to be as demolished as fast, which means that it's going to last longer. The materials are not going to be reused or
yeah, but it's
recycled
also
or destroyed.
Happier employees. That's where your biggest costs are, not the building.
True.
So yeah, you want to think about the comfort
and
happiness of your employees.
Yeah, so your company doesn't become a revolving door because the space is actually where the company is functioning is not a hostile space. It all comes together. Also, if you build, like he was saying, that there is a reason why elite buildings are selling higher or selling at a higher price or renting at a higher price, is because they are guaranteed that they're going to meet certain standards by just having that plaque on the door that other buildings won't. Even the buildings that they say, we build LEED-like, our buildings are LEED-like. If you don't have that plaque, you don't have a third-party certification. That is actually, saying that what you're submitting to them is true or not. So buildings that have those milestones, those standards, that meet those standards, actually tend to be buildings that people appreciate, and they're not as easily dismissed.
And on the operation side as well, you're reducing your energy use and overall OPEX, so that factors in as well.
Yeah, so if you're an owner, then you're paying less for energy and all that stuff. Yeah.
So how does that factor in? And I appreciate that. I'm glad you jumped in too as well, Justin. How does that affect our site selection discussion here in the greater Houston area, which is essentially a flat city right at the, right
Is
at
it?
the lip of the, oh, it sure is, right at the lip of water. How does that?
We're a
go into
little higher
site
than
selection?
everybody else, so it's
Yeah.
not for us.
Yeah, we call this the Heights up here.
I think, quite frankly, if you look at LEED buildings in Houston, the vast majority are in downtown. The reason for that is most of downtown doesn't flood. It's our premier CBD. So institutional investors are clearly looking at floodplain in their decision. So if you're on high ground, that's certainly a much better place to be.
Okay.
Should we open the floodgates and talk about flooding?
No, we're going to get to that later. What I'm excited about is that the City of Houston's planning department and the city in general has been more forward-thinking about how the city plans from a multimodal standpoint as well as from a pedestrian-oriented standpoint. But we do have some more things we can do from a sustainability standpoint. Chapter 42, for as many of the developers and architects know, is really about how the city develops and single-family, multifamily housing. We're looking at how we can get our city to be more dense. I know that's an anathema to many of our long-time Houstonians, but we do need to, people are coming to cities. I think I've seen some figures where 70% of our population will be in cities, and one of those will be Houston, right? So we have to account for that. Now, how that can help from a sustainability standpoint is both from climate as well as livability. If we have more people within the 610 loop or within the other borders, then that will cut their travel times that we alluded to earlier, right? If people live and work and play in more of a concentrated area, then they won't be in their cars as long, right? If they're not in their cars as long, ideally we'll have less emissions, but we also may have, I know this is crazy, less cars on the road, right? And so there's a comprehensive outlook to try to be intentional to get more of a diverse housing in our local borders. Then additionally, some of the other plans that we have, the Walkable Places Committee is looking at how we can have pedestrians coexist with our drivers in the city. I know that's crazy talk as well, but we want to have our pedestrians be able to walk and feel comfortable walking and feel safe walking. And so there's some rules that we're trying to put in place to ensure that on our commercial sectors, in downtown, in the Galleria, but also other parts, we can actually have sidewalks. And crosswalks, and the things that we see in other top-tier cities. Crazy. I know it's crazy talk, right? So we're looking at those kinds of items. And then lastly, and there's a number of other things, the Vision Zero program is looking at how we can eliminate traffic-related deaths in the city by 2030. It's amazing that we still have, and we hear about it now, even with the implementation of our bike plan, which did not go the way it needs to go, quite frankly. People getting seriously harmed or killed at intersections, and we have to be much more intentional about that to make this a really sustainable city. So these things are kind of looking at it from a livability standpoint, but I think going back to some of our earlier comments, the city can still push more about what we can do from a climate standpoint. There are still some things we need to do for flood mitigation. And honestly, I think the city could take a stronger role in partnering more with the county, because these need to be regional addressed. They can't just be by the city. And so I think partnering with the city of Houston, Harris County, as well as our other neighboring counties need to work together for flood mitigation. Because I'm one of those people that see the flood waters rise, and my house is not flooded, but I've been a way station for many people. So, even though I like having barbecues with 30 people in my house, I like to plan for it. So that's one of the things we're all looking forward with the city of Houston. One of the things we want to be able to do now, I know we have some questions from the audience, and I believe you were instructed to write them on cards. So if you have a card, you can pass it to Caitlin or Amanda. We will get those questions. Wow, okay, you guys are popular, I tell you.